Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 223 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Saturday morning spread. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. We did our Royal Rumble preview on Saturday on the Saturday morning spread. We used kind of the week off of sports to talk about sports entertainment. So Shane, we'll lead off the show. What are your thoughts on professional wrestling? Were you ever a fan as a kid? Did you ever have a favorite?
No. However, I do. So I can't remember if it was Tuesday nights or Thursday nights, but I remember when I was a kid, my dad was in a bowling league, and I would go to the bowling alley with him. And wrestling was usually on one of the TVs there, and I would kind of watch it in between watching him bowl. And so I do sort of remember that and being interested in it, but definitely not to the degree that I had favorites or really followed anything.
How many wrestlers do you think you could name, top of your head here?
Yeah, probably none. Probably none.
I think you could do more than you think, but we'll move on. I won't embarrass Shane the way he embarrasses me with questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do ask you questions about football, which is the sport this podcast covers. I do remember playing there was a wrestling game that I played on the Nintendo 64 way back in the day, and that was fun. There was also like a boxing game that I can't remember. It was on PlayStation that I can't remember what the name of it was.
PlayStation would have been late for Mike Tyson Punch-Out, but that would have been probably more of a nice.
Yeah, no, it was more of an arcadey boxing game. I did play. I mean, I remember playing Punch-Out on like the NES back in the day, but so there's a little bit. I had a passing interest in wrestling when it was on TV at the bowling alley, and I did play an N64 game off and on.
There we go.
So yeah, that's about it though. So you said you covered it on Saturday. When is it? I have no idea.
It happened that day. It normally is at night because it was in Saudi Arabia. It was at 2:00, which is a whole other conversation. But it was a fun show. Nothing groundbreaking. The Royal Rumble is kind of so WrestleMania is the biggest show of the year that happens in April. The Royal Rumble sets you up for WrestleMania. It happens in January usually and kind of sets the next couple months up to the big show. It's second biggest show of the year.
All right. Well, this is the biggest show of the year, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
Coming up for the NFL, we've got the Super Bowl coming up, and today we are going to dive in to a little bit of Super Bowl preview. It's not going to be like super in depth because obviously we kind of cover the NFL as a whole on an Eagles podcast network, and so we do watch a lot of games. We've obviously watched a lot of Seahawks. We've watched a lot of the Patriots this year. These are teams that we have liked throughout the year. Mark called the Patriots to the Super Bowl, I think like halfway through the season almost. And so these are teams we've talked about and watched, but this won't be like the deepest dive of deep dives. We're going to go over some stuff, some interesting things to watch for, and then kind of briefly talk about all the dominoes that have fallen coaching-wise as well. So probably a little bit of a shorter show today. But we get Seahawks versus Patriots. And we'll just kind of break it down. I guess we'll give some picks. Mark said he's got some prop bets that he's been researching as well. And so we can get into a few of those. But just looking at this game initially, Mark, you were saying before we got on, you don't feel like this is the most hyped Super Bowl matchup. What are kind of your thoughts going into the game, just generally? And then we can dive into some of the specifics.
Yeah, I mean, just off your point with the hype of it, and I know some of that you could probably, as a commenter, if you're not an Eagles fan listening, and be like, well, the Eagles have been in 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls, so that probably changes my perspective of hype. But I'm trying to even compare it to the non-Eagles Super Bowls of the last couple of years, and it feels like maybe it's early. It's obviously still Monday morning here, and I'm sure that the clips and Super Bowl Radio Row and all that stuff will get going the next couple days, and ESPN and NFL Network will kick it into hyperdrive and all that stuff. But it just feels like, just basing off social media, basing off people in my life, it feels like not a ton of Super Bowl talk like a week out, I guess. It doesn't feel like, I guess we don't have a superstar in the game. There's not a Josh Allen or there's not a hated Patrick Mahomes Chiefs team that's been there multiple years. We obviously don't have the local tie to it. Not that these are small market teams. I mean, New England's a pretty big market, but you don't have a New York or a Chicago or an LA or, it's interesting that maybe it'll pick up, I'm sure, but I think the route that the Patriots took to get here and maybe not being the most impressive offense all the way, maybe the fact that the Seahawks are quarterbacked by Sam Darnold, I think that probably has a big factor. Have you kind of noticed the same thing?
Yeah, I haven't seen, of course, my Twitterverse has all been filled with Eagles offensive coordinator talk as normal, and I'm not really plugged into a lot of national podcasts anymore. The more that I've done this, the less I've kind of listened to other places, and so I've also been just really busy with all the super cold weather that came in. That makes life a little difficult on a farm. So I've been a little less plugged into all the media and things than normal over the last week, but I personally am really excited for this Super Bowl. It's when we went into conference championship weekend, this is the matchup that I wanted in the Super Bowl. And, nothing against Denver. If Bo Nix had been healthy, it might have been a different story, but I didn't want to see a backup quarterback limping into the Super Bowl behind an awesome defense. On the NFC side of things, I would have been fine with the Rams, but I was pulling for the Sam Darnold comeback tour, if you will. And I think that's a really cool story. Like, I think there's some really cool storylines on both sides of the ball with Sam Darnold being cast off. And then again, last year, like it ended in disaster. The Minnesota season last year ends in disaster. A lot of people, us included, thought that the Seahawks were kind of crazy for moving on from Geno and bringing in Darnold. So his redemption tour is a lot of fun. So there's a lot of fun things to root for with him. And of course, we both really like Drake May. We like Mike Vrabel. And I can certainly understand people just being over the Patriots in the Super Bowl. My whole thing is just everything I hated about the Patriots is gone. Like, Brady's gone, Belichick's gone, which we might have to talk about Belichick on the back end of this show. But those two guys are gone, and it's just an entire turnover. It's a new team. It's a young team. And so I think it's going to be a fun Super Bowl matchup. I hope I can see an outcome where the Seahawks just kind of overwhelm the Patriots. Certainly, Drake May hasn't looked great through the air, and there's some extenuating circumstances with the defenses he's faced to get here in the weather in some of those games. But there's a thought in the back of my mind that, like, the Seahawks might just blow them out. I don't think that's going to happen. It wouldn't surprise me, but I think we're going to be in for a good football game.
Trying to do a little quick research here. We've had 16 Super Bowls close with a spread, or I guess dating back to over the last 30 years. We've had 16 Super Bowls that have had a spread of 4.5 or more. The underdog is 12-2-2 against the spread in those, and I had heard a stat like that. I'll have you guess, Shane, this time about football.
All right.
When was the last time that there was an underdog in the Super Bowl greater than 4.5 points?
2017.
No, we were actually 4.5.
Wait, you said, say your question one more time.
Sorry. An underdog bigger than what Seattle is right now, so more than 4.5 points. There's actually been a bunch of 4.5 point spread Super Bowls, funny enough, but there hasn't been one more than 4.5 in quite some time.
Interesting. I would have thought 2017 was. I don't know. When was it?
The Cardinals and the Steelers, all the way back in Super Bowl 43. So it's been 17 years since we had an underdog bigger than what we had here with Seattle. So we had the Bengals against the Rams. They were a 4.5 point dog. The Eagles against the Patriots in 2017 were a 4.5 point dog. Denver against Carolina was actually a 4.5 point dog. Baltimore was a 4.5 point dog against San Fran and Kaepernick. New Orleans was a 4.5 point dog against the Colts when they beat them. And then you had a bunch before that with much bigger spreads. Of recent years, you don't get very many big spreads. And I'll say, I don't know if even any of those 4.5 point spread Super Bowls I've mentioned, which is 5 of them in the last 15 years, I don't remember as many people picking a blowout as I do this year. Like, what I feel like I have heard about this Super Bowl has been very slanted to oh, Seattle's going to blow them out or Seattle's going to kill them. They're better everywhere on the field. And I think it's going to be close. And I feel like we're in an era now with Super Bowls, taking last year aside, that most of the games are close. And I think it's going to be a really down to the wire. I actually think a little bit maybe high scoring Super Bowl. So I guess I'll start there before we get to the picks. The total, you can get it at 45 and a half. What do you think of that, Shane? Do you think this is going to be a higher scoring game, lower scoring? I always like to say that I feel like a close game generally drives more scoring, which,
Hmm.
at the end of the game, there's timeouts and, you're strategically trying to get as many drives as possible. I'm pretty big on the over here. I lean over.
Was 45? It's what, 24, 21 ish. I could see the over on that. I feel like a lot of times, and again, not last year notwithstanding, that extra week more so gives offenses a chance to cook some things up than defenses. I feel like you see a lot more game plan specific alterations for an offense than a defense, because defense, it's your whole structure and your scheme, and you're not going to be a quarters team all year and come out and play press man and things like that. But so I feel like that extra week tends to favor offenses a little bit. And so I'm with you on that. I think these are two really good defenses. But I mean, we saw some cracks in the Seahawks defense against the Rams. And well, let's get into this. This is one of my stats I had. So I think this game gets decided on explosive plays. And so if you look at the second half of the season this year, the Patriots ranked first in the NFL in explosive play rate allowed at 9.6%. So the Patriots defense was only allowing an explosive play on 9.6% of opponent snaps, which was best in the league. The Seahawks were second at 10%. And so they're the two best defenses in the league at not allowing explosive plays. And in the playoffs, they've gone opposite directions. New England's is all the way down to 4.8%. And of course, you get the snow game against a backup quarterback, and that certainly helps. And so their defense hasn't gone to that much of another level, so much as it's been circumstances. But the Seahawks, they allowed 15 explosive plays to the Rams in the NFC Championship game. So their explosive play rate allowed in the playoffs is up to 16.1%. And we talked about Sam Darnold is the reason they won that football game. The Rams put up a 90th percentile EPA performance against the Seahawks. Now, they are division rivals. It was their third game of the year, and we talk all the time about not making too much of a judgment off of a regular season divisional matchup just because of the variance and the weird things that happen in divisional games. But it's worth pointing out that the Seahawks defense hasn't exactly been stellar in the playoffs. And so if you're telling me this becomes a high-scoring game, I'm not shocked by that. You look at their deep passing efficiency. They're two of the best in the league at that. New England is first in the league in deep passing efficiency. Seattle is third. They are tied for the highest number of 20-plus yard runs this year at 19 each. That tied for second in the league. And so these are defenses that have been really good at not allowing explosive plays, and everybody's talking about the defenses, but these are two offenses who have also been fantastic at generating explosive plays. And I just typically tend to think that extra week of rest and that extra week of game planning helps the offenses more. And so, if you tell me you're from the future and that this is a high-scoring game, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
And it's also something with the Patriots, and I think so many people are talking about their offense and kind of concerned about it, looking at how it looks the last couple of weeks. Obviously, the Drake May injury that is up in the air that we don't know about, and I don't think we will know about personally.
Yeah.
I think they're going to do everything in their power to prevent anyone from knowing anything about that. I think by the time the game comes, 2 weeks off, I'm sure they're going to pump him with whatever's possible to help whatever the ailment is. I can't imagine it's going to be too big of a factor. I feel like too often we probably over factor these things in these games. Mahomes, obviously, with the ankle a few years ago, Sam Darnold with the oblique just a couple weeks ago in the divisional round. I feel like I've seen this movie too many times where it's went that way, as opposed to he comes out and he doesn't look healthy. I kind of think we'll probably get I don't know why I've said probably. I've talked at length about how I think that Drake May will have a good game in this game. It is interesting. This is kind of a detour here. This is like the most long shot Super Bowl basically of the gambling era, when you look at where they were in the preseason. Patriots were like 80-1. The Seahawks, I don't know exactly what the number was, but we haven't even had one in like 25 years where we've had two teams above 20. And these two teams were way above that coming into the year. So that's another fun factor here. Whoever raises the Super Bowl trophy, it's not like anybody had this at the beginning of the year, which just a fun little detour I meant to mention a little earlier. But I think you're exactly right on the explosive plays, and it's why I do think Drake May is going to win. If the Patriots are going to compete, if the Patriots are going to win this game, I think we're going to get back to what we've seen from the Patriots for most of the year until these last couple weeks. And we've talked at length about this offense. I think it's going to look like a different sport, not being in 20-degree snowing temperatures for 2 of the last 3 weeks, and then 3 of the last 3 weeks have been below freezing. I do think, obviously, San Fran, it's not a dome, but I don't know the weather forecast there. I expect it to probably be fine. And I think you are going to see the Patriots offense look like it's taken the shackles off a little bit.
I was just looking back at our preseason preview notes. Both of these teams' over-under win total going into the year was 7.5, and they're both in the Super Bowl now, which is just kind of wild. But yeah, I think it's going to be about explosive plays. I think it's going to be about explosive plays through the air. Specifically, you look at, like, Seattle has the best run defense in the NFL. They've only allowed a 34% rushing success rate all season long. And the Patriots are the best EPA per play passing attack in the NFL. And so, I think it's going to put a lot on Drake May's plate to, come in second-year starter. First playoff appearance was this season, and now he's in the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden he's going to have to do it all against a defense that's really good through the air, but they're dominant on the ground. And the one place they've been a little susceptible, and it's been a place that May has thrived this year, is in scrambles. Drake May led the league in scrambles this season. And in the postseason, he only trails Patrick Mahomes by 18 yards for the most in the next-gen stats era in a postseason. So, it's pretty certain we're going to see him break that record in this game, but he's averaging just under 14 yards per carry on scrambles. And so, we saw that in the Denver game, right? In the snow, it was tough sledding. Nobody could run the football, but you get Drake May ripping off some of these runs, and including the run that people have speculated that he got hurt on. And so that factors into it all. If the shoulder is injured, what does it do to him as a runner? Because I don't think you can protect Drake May in this game. I don't think you're going to be able to hand the ball off 20 times and expect to do anything with it. You're going to need to use him as a runner. You're going to have to put the ball in his hands. And a lot of it's going to come down to these two quarterbacks, which sounds like dumb analysis, right? Of course it's going to come down to quarterbacks, but I think it's especially intriguing when you have the two quarterbacks that we have, Drake May, who we just don't have a lot of data on relative to other quarterbacks we've previewed for Super Bowl games before. And then you've got Sam Darnold, who has just been, Jekyll and Hyde throughout the last couple of seasons. And he's had stretches where he looks really good. I think the NFC Championship game is probably the best performance of his career, but it's still, even for a guy that's headed into the Super Bowl now, and a guy that I'm rooting for, I want him to go do well. But it still lingers in the back of my head. What happened at the end of last season? And what happened in some of those Rams games in the regular season? And yeah, he gets that monkey off of his back, but he was the 6th worst quarterback in the NFL when pressured during the regular season. Now, he's been phenomenal under pressure in the postseason. He threw 3 touchdowns under pressure in the NFC title game, which is the most by any quarterback in a game this season. But does it swing back more towards the middle? Like, maybe Darnold's not as bad as he looked against the pressure at the end of last year and at times this year, but maybe he's not as good under pressure as he was in the NFC Championship game, to when everything was in rhythm for him. Even his pressure touchdown, everything was just in rhythm. He was firing on all cylinders. The truth of who he is as a player probably lies somewhere in the middle, and it's just a question of where that settles out against a Patriots team that's probably going to be able to get after him a little bit.
Yeah, I think she'll probably. I think he'll probably have a good game. I think they will probably be able to move the ball most of the game. I think it's about when that mistake comes. Is that mistake coming early in the game in the first quarter where you can kind of recover from that, like we saw the Rams game, the second Rams game, where they won in the regular season and they go to overtime. It's funny that I said shill. I was going to say I think Sam will, and I think he will, and I mixed that together. Sorry, Sam. But I think that they're going to move the ball. I think they're going to do well. Will that mistake come at the end of the game in a close game? Will that mistake come when they're already up 10 points? Will that mistake come right away? And maybe that's kind of something he can't recover from. It's interesting, kind of the timing of the mistake and really how they bounce back from it. Because I do think on the whole, I expect Seattle's offense to probably put up 24 plus points. Just like I expect New England, honestly, to put up 24 plus points. And I would love to localize the turnover concerns just to Sam Darnold, but I think Drake May, obviously the fumble issue, it's hard to ignore. You could say it for both sides. When do the mistakes happen? Just as much, I guess you could call those explosive plays on the other side of the ball for the defense, but just as much as this game will come down to breaking big ones on offense, I think it'll come down to where on the field are those turnovers? Where in the game are those turnovers? And I do think you'll probably get one from both quarterbacks. I think the odds are, I think they're like plus 200 on that. I don't know if that was an interception or just a turnover though. I'd have to go back and look at that. And I would say that's not one that's on my prop sheet, but I do think you probably get a turnover from both sides.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you look at it, obviously Drake May's fumbling issues are documented. Like, he's put the ball on the turf a lot this season. You've got Sam Darnold committed a turnover on a league high 7.2% of his pressure dropbacks in the regular season.
Leads league in turnovers.
Yeah, the Patriots defense has generated 4 turnovers caused by pressure in 3 postseason games. And again, you got to face Jared Stidham in one of those games, and I think that was 2 of the 4. But still, that's turnover forced a game prior to that. And so it's explosive plays both ways. It's who's going to give up the deep passes that work, who is going to generate the turnovers. And it's going to be fascinating to watch because I really do think, like you said, I think both of these teams are going to make some of those mistakes, and it's going to be about who can capitalize. One other thing I wanted to point out is the Patriots, one of the things they really like to do in the red zone is get into jumbo packages, and they've done that at a really high rate. Well, the Seahawks have faced the Rams, who do that at a really high rate 3 times this season. Now, they didn't do a very good job against them defensively 2 of the 3 times, but it's not going to be like it's a novel thing that they haven't seen. And so some interesting matchups, things to watch there. Another really interesting matchup for me to watch is going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously such a good player, but the Patriots like to run a lot of quarters-based coverages. I would look for Jackson Smith and Jigba to spend a lot of time in the slot in this game and potentially even out of the backfield. He's operated out of the backfield. He caught that touchdown pass on the scissors concept out of the backfield in the NFC Championship game. But when you get into quarters type defenses, the guy out of the backfield is often going to be matched up on a linebacker. The guy out of the slot is often going to be matched up on a safety on any sort of a vertical route. And so I would look for Jackson Smith and Jigba to spend a lot of time in the slot running vertical routes in this game. I think that's how you go attack this defense and generate some explosive plays.
This is a boring prop, but I might as well, since we're talking JSN. Who I don't know. Can you pull up the Super Bowl MVP odds while we're talking here, Shane?
Yeah.
So that's not my pick here, but I have to imagine he's probably the 3rd favorite behind the 2 quarterbacks. I'm going to go JSN touchdown. It's a flat prop, minus 105. You might have it minus 110 elsewhere, so pretty much even money. But he scored in 10 of his last 19. He scored in 10 of the 19 games this year. But the reason I love it is he scored in 9 of his last 14 games, scoring 10 touchdowns in those 14 games. And that's where he's really hit another height after the first 4 or 5 games of the year. So 9 of the last 14 games, I'll take pretty much even money on that. Even though I do think New England's going to be hyper focused on JSN, I think he has so many ways of scoring touchdowns. He's done well in the red zone. He's done well, breaking one deep. JSN, and we'll get to Clint Kubiak with the Raiders as a comment Yakko asked us to. I've seen some people be like, Clint Kubiak's only done this for 1 year. Every other year he's been an OC. Hasn't been very impressive. I don't know how you could watch this JSN breakout and not want that guy calling plays for your offense. So I know the Raiders don't have really a great receiver, or even a good receiver on their team. But
Brock Bowers, baby.
yeah. Well, I'm sure they'll either draft one or they'll invest in one. Maybe Alec Pierce for like. By the way, get ready for Alec Pierce to get like $100 million. It's going to be insane. And I like Alec Pierce a lot, but there's not a lot of receivers out there. And I've already heard some Clint Kubiak wants Alec Pierce on the Raiders talk. But yeah, expect like 4 years, $80 million there. I remember what were we were talking crazy receiver contracts last year, weren't we? Wasn't it like
it's every year, man.
Clayton got like 15 million or something crazy. Like it's every year now. It's just there. And what we'll talk about, this is such a detour, but we'll talk about it when we get to draft stuff. I think, officially at a point where I am just going to inflate my receiver rankings overall, because I don't think the draft where we're drafting receivers has quite caught up to the way we're paying receivers. Because if you're a top 35 receiver, you're getting paid so much money at this point if you hit the open market.
Yeah, I was trying to look up what some of those were. I'm pretty sure they paid him within like $1 million of what they didn't pay Saquon Barkley.
I think,
Slayton.
yeah. There was some crazy ones last year, and I think you could expect maybe some more this year. There's not a ton of good ones, but maybe that'll even drive some crazier ones. Like the mediocre ones get 10 to 15 million, like Darius Slayton did. But yeah, expect Alec Pierce to get a ton of money. If I'm Alec Pierce, I'm like, hey, Clint Kubiak, can you put me in the JSN slot, and that'll be good. But anyway, yeah, I do think JSN, come hell or high water, I do think he'll figure out a way to have a big impact on this game. And if you're looking at a Seattle MVP, I don't know what the odds are, but I actually think I would lean towards him over anybody else.
Yeah, Darnold is plus 115 for Super Bowl MVP. May is plus 230. JSN is plus 550. Kenneth Walker plus 850. Ramondre Stevenson plus 3,000. And then Stephon Diggs, Rashid Shaheed plus 4,500.
What I will tell people on the Drake May price, do not bet that. Like, you can just bet the Patriots money line at plus 200. Even if you wanted to do that, if you wanted juicy odds, you could just bet Pat's money line with Drake May props, because he's not going to win if he doesn't do well in the game. So that is like a really bad bet. What was the JSN price again?
Plus 550.
That's interesting. That's an interesting price. And I'm sure you could probably parlay your way to interesting odds with him too. But yeah, no MVP odds are grabbing me. Maybe it's because I'm leaning New England and I obviously have my future on New England that sways me a little bit. But there's not a guy on New England that is very interesting to me. I heard Bill Simmons bring up Travion, who has not been very involved. But there are some numbers out there that Travion's been insane this year against too high safety looks. I guess he's been like the best efficiency running back in the NFL at that. And Seattle runs, I forget if the stat was the most in the playoff, most of the playoff teams are the most in the NFL, but they run a ton of too high looks. And I guess the Patriots have not seen like any too high over the last 3 weeks. So there were some people speculating that maybe this is a Travion matchup. So his odds are crazy. You're probably better off just maybe betting like some props from him if you buy into that line of thinking. But I did think that was interesting. He does seem like the kind of guy who could kind of exploit that type of defense.
They only played him 4 snaps in the AFC Championship game, though. So you got to wonder how much he's trusted, if he's even going to be on the field very much.
I agree. Yeah, but it is interesting that maybe they have it strictly to he comes out for too high, like packages. I actually don't know. McDaniel's a freak, so I don't know. But I wouldn't bet it, and I'm certainly not betting it. But I did think that was an interesting nugget to pass along.
I'm picturing a crazy offense now where you put both running backs on the field, and then you take the snap and run like a draw play, but the quarterback is reading the safety rotation to decide which running back to hand it to. Did they rotate? Yeah. Did they spin to single high? Hand it to Ramondre. Did they stay too high? Hand it to Travion.
I don't know what the stats are on this. And when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, I think I had some futures on Jalen Super Bowl MVP from like previously in the playoffs. So I did the research on this the last couple of years, and maybe I could go back and find it for Saturday. But I always feel weird betting receiver to win Super Bowl MVP, because it feels like most of the time, if the receiver has a really good day, the quarterback probably did too. In this case, the JSN thing that I do like is like Sam Darnold throws 2 picks. JSN has 100 and a touchdown, and you feel weird giving Sam the MVP in a game where he didn't play that good, or maybe had his worst game of the playoffs. Like, I feel like I kind of roll my eyes at the receiver pick. That is one that I could envision. And this is not one I can envision, but I might as well say it as we're on receivers here. Kayshon Boutte. Give me Kayshon Boutte over 20. I forget if it's 28.5 or 29.5, but I'll say 29.5 for this sake. 29.5 receiving yards. 8 of his last 13 games, he's had 30 plus. He's averaging 41 receiving yards per game in that stretch, also averaging 41 yards per game over the full season. He's had 66 plus yards in 2 of the 3 playoff games. So I think Boutte, however you say his name, I do think that he is a guy who's going to have a big catch in this game. He's been a guy who's been a big play target for them. Obviously had the big touchdown. I forget which game that was now. But I think Boutte steps up here and has 40, 50 plus yards.
I mean, what are the odds you get a Rashid Shaheed kick return for a touchdown?
Support for the Fans First Sports Network comes from Hyper Natural Style. Men's Journal calls it the best men's polo shirt of 2024. Hyper Natural offers polos, tees, and button-ups that deliver unmatched comfort and style. Hyper Natural is a new generation of clean bio-performance clothing that reduces impact on the planet as well as your own health. Hypernatural created the first ever shirts made from jade stone and crab shells. Supreme natural comfort and cooling performance without harmful chemicals and plastic polyester. Visit hypernaturalstyle.com and receive 20% off at checkout using promo code FFSN. That's hypernaturalstyle.com using FFSN. Thank you for your support.
And then you get like a one catch for 65 yards and a touchdown, and you win the MVP off of one catch.
I don't hate it.
Especially since he's already done it once this season, or this postseason.
He's electric.
Yeah.
He's an electric returner. So, yeah, and I mean, that's a factor for sure in this game. Shaheed has impacted multiple games for Seattle since he's been there, which was, by the way, I forget what they gave up for him, a second or a third. But when they gave it a third, when they gave it up, I was like, third for Shaheed? Like, that feels a little steep. And man, he has absolutely made that look foolish.
I thought that was an awesome trade at the time. It was.
Most people did. I was definitely in the minority. I was never a big Shaheed guy in New Orleans. He was it
was a fourth and a fifth.
Well, that's even better. I don't know why I thought it was a third.
Yeah. At the time, I was like, man, the Eagles should have done that just to keep him away from Seattle.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I guess I've given 2 of my 4 props. Yeah,
throw your other ones out there. Let's go through your props and our picks.
Yeah, I gave the JSN touchdown. I gave the Boutte over 29.5 receiving yards. And then I'm just doubling up on May. These are my 2 favorite props. Drake May over 219.5 passing yards. 12 of the last 16 games. He's done that. He's done it in 15 other 20 games this year. So pretty consistently that hits at a 75% rate over like a large sample size. Obviously has only hit once in the playoffs. But I think that I kind of like this because like you said, there's a chance that Seattle just overwhelms them and it's a blowout. Even if it's a blowout, I kind of love Drake May to probably have to sling it if that's the case. And if it's a close game, I think Drake May's still going to have to sling it, as you kind of laid out, that it's going to have to be done through the air. And I don't see a ton of scenarios that New England blows them out in this game. So I think this is actually my favorite individual bet on the entire Super Bowl is that Drake May over 219.5 passing yards. I do like Drake May over 1.5 pass touchdowns as well. He's hit 2+ touchdowns in 12 of his 20 games, so it's not as strong of a percentage as the over in passing yards. So like I said many times over the last 3 weeks, people have made fun of the Patriots offense a ton. I think in general, cold weather teams maybe sometimes don't get enough slack for how weird some of these playoff games can be and how freezing and how cold and miserable they can be. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago, but my mind always goes back to that Eagles-Packers game last year where we only scored 15 points on offense, really. And, you win 22-10, but the one was basically given to you on a fumble on the punt on the kickoff. The people freaked out about the Eagles offense after that game. They went on to score 28 points, 45 and 50, 50, whatever, 55 and 40. That's what it was.
Yeah. Down
the stretch of that playoff run. And the Rams game should have been like 34 if not for Jake Elliott, but that's a whole other story. I do think that we're going to see this Patriots offense come out in the nice weather, and it's going to look a lot different than what people maybe are expecting it to look like or what it has looked like in recent memory. So I'm going with both those May props, and then I gave the over. I like the over at 45. I'm not betting Pats plus 4.5 because I already have. I actually, who knows? Maybe I end up betting it a small bet on it. I have my Pats 10-1 future. That would make me a nice chunk of change if the Patriots come through and win this game. I will just give a couple of these stats for the people who may want to bet Pats plus 4.5. Underdogs of 4.5 or higher are 10-1 in their last 11 Super Bowls, 12-2 overall since Super Bowl 30. Underdogs have won 3 straight outright and have covered 5 straight in the Super Bowl, 15-7 against the spread over the last 22 years. And this is a dumb one, but the Patriots 6-0 in white jerseys this year, have not lost in white jerseys. But in general, a stat that I think is not being talked about enough, just like last year. I don't know how many times on this show I said, the Eagles have not lost the game Jalen and AJ have started and finished. The Eagles have not lost the game Jalen and AJ have started and finished. They ended up finishing, I think, 15 or 16 in games that Jalen and AJ, they lost the 2 games AJ missed in the beginning of the year, and then they lost the Jalen game that he went out with a concussion against Washington. People are not talking enough about the fact that New England is 16-1 in their last 17 games. I know that the schedule has not been difficult in any capacity, but their one loss came to the Bills, who they also beat. I don't think New England's being given enough credit. I get you go on paper and you look at the EPA and you look at, position group by position group. I get Seattle they're one of the best EPA or best DVOA teams of all time, according to Aaron Schatz. The fact that New England won 16 or the last 17 games is being far too ignored, in my opinion. I don't care who they played. I don't care how the backup quarterback race has worked out for them. But I really do think that this is going to be a really, really close game. And I'm going with Drake May to have his crowning moment after a couple weeks of weirdness. I think the Patriots win a close one. And you know what? I didn't bet this yet. I'll bet overtime too. I always love throwing a 13 or 14-1 overtime out there. So give me overtime. Patriots win. I don't know. I was going to say by a field goal, but I guess if it's overtime, I'll say 30. They go for. Or I guess that doesn't make sense. I don't know. I'll workshop it. 31-28, but I'll workshop this.
All right. I think I'm sticking still on the Seahawks again. There's really not an outcome in this game that would surprise me. I can see every avenue from Seahawks run away with this one to Sam Darnold totally melts down. I think it's going to be a pretty good game though. I'm going to take the Seahawks to win. I'll go 28-24. So Seahawks win. That'd be Patriots cover, which is about where I think the reality of this game is going to lie. But I'm excited for this one. I know maybe overall, or maybe just in my Eagles bubble, people aren't as interested. I don't know. I feel like there's been some apathy about this matchup. I'm really excited for it. So I can't wait to watch on Sunday. So anything else you want to throw out on the Super Bowl before we briefly go over some coaching news and then we'll get out of here?
Vegas would be happy if the Seahawks win and the Patriots cover. That's definitely their best path. Is if the winner doesn't cover. Vegas always makes a ton of money if that happens.
Yeah. So, all right. Run down, Mark, the 10 head coach hirings that we have so far. And so we still have, what is it? The Raiders, I think, have not made a move. And the Cardinals haven't made a move. Is that right?
Well, no, they're both official now. LaFleur is official for Arizona. I don't think the Raiders can't make Kubiak official technically, but they've all announced it. LaFleur is official, though, with Arizona, 5-year deal.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just run down the list then. We'll start with the Cardinals and LaFleur then. So the Cardinals hire Mike LaFleur to be their new head coach. What are your thoughts on that one?
I like it. A lot of people out there are going to say, he's not even a play caller. You look at the last 3 Rams OCs, it's Matt LaFleur, Liam Cohen, and Kevin O'Connell. I think they're all doing just fine without having called plays in LA. Now, I think Matt LaFleur, I think a couple of them had, Liam Cohen went on to Tampa and called plays. Kevin O'Connell, I think, had called plays for a couple games a year where a head coach got fired before he went to LA. But Mike LaFleur also called plays with the Jets. And did that go well? Absolutely not. But he had Zach Wilson. Now, are we really going to blame Mike LaFleur for that? I'm probably not going to. So I'm going to go ahead and, especially under Saleh, like I think that was a mess. So I like the hire. I think obviously his brother's done a great job. I think you look at the McVay-Shanahan tree and, it's hard to argue with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it also makes sense to take a swing when you're an organization like the Cardinals that has been bad for quite a while, and there doesn't seem to be an easy path out. You're probably getting rid of Kyler. You're probably rebooting this whole thing. So maybe it's early for Mike LaFleur, but that's probably the only way you're getting a guy like that is if you're early. So we'll say LaFleur to the Cardinals. Tentatively for Cardinals fans, hopeful on that one. So the Raiders to Kubiak to the Raiders, not official, but it's unofficially official because that was kind of the holdout with the Cardinals is both the Cardinals and the Raiders wanted Kubiak, and it appears that he's going to be the next Raiders head coach. Yako asked earlier if we like the fit with Kubiak to the Raiders with Mendoza. I love what Kubiak has done this year with Seattle. I think he was a great candidate. They're obviously going to have to figure out quarterback. And I mean, figure out quarterback means, do we like Mendoza or are we going to trade back for a crap ton of picks and try again in 2027? And it seems like we haven't had the Super Bowl yet. And it's pretty much like automatically assumed who the number 1 overall pick is going to be and who's going to be drafting him. So I think it's pretty safe to say Kubiak is going to be in Las Vegas along with Mendoza. How do you think that's going to play out?
It seems like Clint is a big nerd, and it seems like Fernando Mendoza is a big nerd, so maybe they'll get along well. They're very nerdy quarterback head coach pair. No, but in all seriousness, I think we've been clear, from the beginning of the head coach cycle, this was the prized candidate to me. In a year where there wasn't a ton of offensive play callers who, didn't have some stink on them or didn't have, a lot of reasons to not get a fan base excited. I think Clint Kubiak was the one exciting non-retread option. I mean, I like Mike LaFleur, but I don't think that's going to get people that jazzed up. I like Todd Monken. That's not going to get people that jazzed up. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I guess that's one of the only other ones that have broke since our last pod. But Clint Kubiak, the Raiders won this offseason. You get the number 1 pick. You get Clint Kubiak. This is, it seems like things are going in the right direction. You're going to have your head coach, quarterback, running back, tight end locked up. You have some pieces on the O-line. Go out and buy a defense. Draft the rest of your picks on defense. And I think, they should be able to turn it around in the next couple of years. Obviously, depending on Mendoza. I'm not the biggest Mendoza guy, but people love him, and he's probably the right pick to make. And I can't imagine a better guy to go out and get than Kubiak for that. So Kubiak, it feels like you just plug him into the Sam Darnold role.
Yeah. So then we've got John Harbaugh to the Giants, which we talked about last time. This is almost entirely contingent on if they were able to get Todd Monken as the OC, and they were not. Todd Monken goes to the Browns as their head coach. So I think that automatically brings the Giants hiring down a little bit because you could have gone out and gone after an offensive guy to work with Jackson Dart. You could have targeted a Mike McDaniel. You could have and maybe you don't want him to be your head coach. Maybe there's some things there. But you could have just hired Todd Monken to begin with, and instead you could have probably got stuff. There's a lot of guys you could have got with offensive backgrounds, and instead you went for the CEO head coach that just got fired from a way better organization than you are because they couldn't get over the hump. And so I think it's fair to question that process. Now, I do think Harbaugh is a floor raiser, and I think the Giants need that. I don't think he's the coach that you're going to go. Let's say this. If he couldn't get to a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson and Mike McDonald and some of these other guys, I just don't see that being the ceiling in New York. But I do think he will make them a better organization. But this one falls off a decent amount for me because Monken goes to the Browns.
And Cliff, it does seem like Cliff's probably going to be the guy there for the Giants, so that does help soften the blow a little. But Monken and Harbaugh obviously worked well together already. It's not as much of like a trying to mesh together, and I do think Cliff will do well if he goes there. But I'm skeptical of the Harbaugh thing already. You can compare Harbaugh and Mike McCarthy, and a lot of the numbers are pretty similar. Yet we talk about one guy like he's an idiot and one guy like he's a genius. I think they're probably both a little over exaggerated both ways. I think Mike McCarthy's probably not as dumb of a coach as we act like he is. Whereas John Harbaugh is also probably not this like Mike Tomlin, I don't know. Part of me, I feel like Tomlin and Harbaugh always they're always going to be linked in a certain way, just due to how many big games they played against each other and how consistent they both were with the same team for so long. But Tomlin did that without an elite quarterback for most of it. And Harbaugh has had Lamar now for, I don't know how many years, 7, 8 years. So it's hard for me to evaluate quite as much.
Yeah. We'll pick it up here because we're running up against a deadline here. But Monken to the Browns. I think the Browns messed around and found out about their coaching stuff, and it sounds like Schwartz is on the warpath now. I heard reporting that he won't be back with the team. I don't know how that's going to play out, but just a mess of an organization. So Monken gets his shot as head coach, and I'm happy for him. It comes in a pretty bad situation, though. So I don't know what to make of this one. I don't think it's going to end well, but I think Monken's probably about the best they could do given the circumstances.
Yeah, I like Monken more than most, but like you said, it does seem like it's a mess. Maybe they got turned down by some people. Also, Jim Schwartz, I think that this hire was made thinking Jim Schwartz would be linked with him, and now it's not. So I like Monken more than most, but it's hard for you to envision this not ending in a firing within the next 3 years.
Yeah. Okay, Falcons get Stefanski. I think that's a great move. I think, especially in that division, I think he's got a chance to come in and do really well. So that's probably one of my favorite landing spots so far.
I'll just simplify it this way. I think the winners of the offseason are Atlanta, Vegas, and Arizona, I'll say. I'll say that the losers are Pittsburgh, Tennessee, and Cleveland, even though I like the Monken hire, just how it all broke down. And then I'd say in the middle, you have the Giants, the Ravens, the Dolphins, and I'll put Joe Brady, even though I might like Joe Brady more than LaFleur or maybe even Stefanski. I would just say that the situation and, it feeling like you needed a change and, doing it, it just feels like it's one of the only situations that promoting from within felt weird. So I'll put them in the middle, even if I like Brady just as much as the top guys.
Greg Rosenthal tweeted out, if I'm Joe Brady, I'm absolutely trying to hire Sean McDermott as my defensive coordinator. It's a good scheme fit with the players they have.
They hired Jim Leonard, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So, on the Mike McCarthy, he's the last one I'll mention specifically for the Steelers. If you want to look at it with a glass half full as a Steelers fan, I think that sometimes you just need a change, and maybe it was time for Tomlin to move on somewhere else and to bring in somebody new. And even if you just consider McCarthy and Tomlin like roughly equivalent coaches, sometimes that change is helpful. McCarthy has worked with Aaron Rodgers. He's worked with Dak Prescott. Both are good quarterbacks, so I don't want to overstate his role in developing them. But he's been around a lot of good quarterbacks, and so you hope that he has either contributed to that development or he's at least learned something along the way, because the thing this organization has to get right is quarterback. It hasn't been right in closing in on a decade now. And so if they can figure that out, it'll make a big impact. And so maybe McCarthy can help them figure that aspect out just a little bit. I'm not sure I buy that, but if I was going to try to sell it to a Steelers fan, which I've had to do, because I've got a couple friends that are Steelers fans, that's the way that I would sell it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think we talked about it last week, but yeah, it's more the situation than anything else making it a bad hire.
Yeah. So, all right. Anything else you want to shout out, coaching hires wise, Super Bowl wise? Any final thoughts before we get you out of here, Mark?
No, not really. No, I think we hit all of them. Final thoughts. Joel Embiid over 28.5 points tonight. That's my auto bet. It's become my Jalen Hurts touchdown.
All right. Well, that is going to do it. Thank you guys for joining us for episode number 223 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcasts. We will be live next week recapping the Super Bowl, and then we will start ramping up and transitioning into NFL draft coverage. So Chalk Talk will stay on the airwaves, and you can follow along with us throughout the offseason. You can follow us also on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. NFL, and we will catch you guys next time.